Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. The FIA have released the official F1 entry list today for the 2025 season, and Lewis Hamilton appears under Scuderia Ferrari. His preparation is underway for joining the Scuderia, with learning Italian and many other things on the horizon. Driving old Ferrari cars, certainly the 2023 model, in the start of the new year will be a key part of the preparation. How successful is this partnership going to be? Loads of other very interesting and dramatic stories of the day as well. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. We begin, as unfortunately always, with the FIA. There is some good at the FIA. There seems to be mostly bad. We did, of course, yesterday talk about the 2026 cars, which definitely look like older spec models, right? I mean, these front wings, especially with the changes they've made to them that we detailed in yesterday's video, look a bit more like, a 2009 car, 2008 car, something like that, right? The curved front wings. There's been lots of talk about it today, that these cars look a fair bit like, and I understand where they're coming from, the more agile, entertaining cars to watch generation, I would argue, in Formula 1. I'm a bit biased because that was really when I first started watching 2008, those type of seasons. But still, I don't think there's any doubt those cars looked, drove and sounded better than the cars of today. Was the racing always better? Sometimes, sometimes not. Obviously, this season has still been mega, but I think if you ask most Formula 1 fans that watched back then and still watch today, would you prefer to go back to lighter, more nimble, agile cars? They would, that looked something like this, they would probably tell you yes. I think there's a lot of people, for example, who look at, the Ferrari F-2004, or even obviously the chrome McLarens from 2008, that kind of era, and say, like, that is what a Formula 1 car should look like. And, look, I'm inclined to agree, especially when it comes down to the weight of the cars. This, unfortunately, is the issue. Yes, the 2026 cars may look and appear to be not that dissimilar to the, let's say 20 or so years ago, what the cars looked like back then, but the reality is they are still going to be 200 kilograms heavier, which is just so mega. They're wider, they're longer, not as long as what we have right now in 2022 to 2025, but still not as short or thin as we would like. And obviously lots of horsepower, but that is being generated largely from an electrical power unit in 2026, which is fundamentally why the car is so damn heavy, because of the batteries associated with making that work. So, yeah, there are some positive things, but there are some negative things. I still think there's a long way to go. The other part of the FIA, which has been causing controversy today, as always is the case, is from Mr. Mohammed Ben Sulayem. So we talked about this the other day. There was to be a vote today on whether the Senate, which always sounds good, and of course the president himself, can effectively control the audit committee. And this was controversial for many reasons. Today was the day it was going to be voted, and guess what? The FIA General Assembly in Rwanda today has approved changes to the Motorsport Federation statutes, seeing powers delegated to the FIA president and the president of the Senate. Now, the amount of dodginess from this organisation is truly legendary at the moment. Of course, there's been lots of talk about, well, if Ben Sulayem's been pissing everyone off, how is he still in the role, or how are people still voting him into the role? The way that the voting tends to work is if you can get certain countries' votes to get on board with you, in whatever way you might potentially achieve that, then that will be enough to maintain your spot. And, well, this is controversial, as Andrew Benson and the BBC point out today. Even some motorsport leaders are saying, yeah, this is a worrisome concentration of power. Changes to the statutes concerning the ethics and audit committees each passed with about 75% approval. Opponents say the changes will reduce accountability at the FIA, which, well, you guys can make up your own mind. But there are multiple individuals coming out publicly and saying to BBC Sport, such as Thierry Willemark here from the Royal Touring Club of Belgium, who says it's a concentration power that we have to be worrisome about. He said the correct interpretation of the changes was that essentially they put the president of the FIA and the president of the FIA Senate, who are allies and on the same leadership team, in control of the ethics and audit committees, which look, we heard about this the other day, that it was getting proposed. Now it's actually happening, that the president can effectively control the audit and ethics committee, which is meant to ensure that he and his team operate ethically, and even from like an audit perspective, like an accounting point of view, there have been concerns on how Ben Sulayem has been using his budget, which he effectively gets as president. There were rumours, of course, a while ago that he was using a lot of the budget on maintenance of his private jet and stuff like this. The audit committee is meant to control these type of things, but now the president basically has control of it. Even David Richards, head of Motorsport UK, he's the chairman there, he says, I've got reservations about a number of issues within the changes, but it's the process that I'm challenging and want to see more transparent in the future. This is not an issue about what the changes might or might not be to the rules on the Senate or the Ethics Committee. This is a fundamental debate about how governance should work within the FIA and the opportunity for proper open debate on these matters. The other guy, Willemark, said, I don't say anyone plans to abuse this, but with good governance, normally you would have an audit committee that in our case would report to the Senate, and the denomination of the audit committee should be approved by the General Assembly, i.e., the Audit and Ethics Committee would be holding accountable those in charge of the entire show, rather than kind of like the other way around, which holds nobody at the top end actually to account. So these guys are quite careful with their words, really. But as they go on to finalise, and you should prove the possibility for General Assembly members to make reference to the Audit Committee if they have doubt on some practices, so there can be an inquiry running independently of anyone who is leading the federation, which is not how it currently seems. It is just a matter of good practice and governance that you see in most organisations around the world. And that's how the FIA has been until today, when we are moving away from that. So, yeah, Ben Sulayem continues to get under people's skin, and basically everyone seems to be annoyed at this guy, but he is still in that role, and he will likely get re-elected, because as it stands, there seems to be no other viable candidate, certainly no other viable candidate who's actually likely to win, given where Ben Sulayem enjoys his support within the federation. Now, this was another one, because Ben Sulayem said, hey, yeah, we can have permanent stewards if someone else wants to pay for it, because we don't have the money to do it. And I thought this whole phrase was remarkable to me. It's very nice talk on the stewards and everything, the permanent stewards, but when they say professional and they want professional, they don't want to pay for it. That is so obvious. They talk and then they say, where are you putting the money? Why don't we do this? But I don't say, oh, sorry, what about you? The drivers are getting over $100 million. I mean, okay, maybe Hamilton and Verstappen, but apart from that, I mean, look, they're getting paid a lot of money, but my point is, this is a massive false equivalency. As he says, do I ask where they spend it? No, it's up to them, it's their right. So please, it's not only me saying it's none of their business, we do whatever we want with our money. It's our business. It's also the same with them and their money. It's their business. So hang on, are you serious right now? Like, these guys are getting paid for doing a job, basically. So it's their money. It's their personal money, right? Like, the drivers should not have to be paying stewards out of their own pockets, right? Like, what are we talking about here? Whereas the FIA, the money that they have to spend, it's not Ben Sulayem's personal pocket money that he can spend on his private jet that the audit committee now doesn't do anything about because he now controls it because the vote passed in the Senate or whatever it was today. Like, it's so crazy, is it not? For him to be saying, oh, like, what are you talking about? It's my money, it's our money, we do what we want with it. Like, no, you're meant to be doing a service to Formula One. Formula One are paying you to govern their sports. And yet the money you're getting from that, you're saying, oh, well, we're not going to do anything to improve the sport. We're going to use it for X, Y, Z. And sure, some of that money goes to good causes. Fair enough. Like, obviously, Verstappen's getting involved in doing his community service out there in Rwanda in, I'm sure, great services to the world of motorsport. But the idea of when the drivers come at the FIA who govern the sport and are reliant on making things fair, and they say, hey, this isn't fair because with the stewards are changing, we need to make sure they're more permanent. All of a sudden, the FIA is saying, what are you talking about? We're not spending money on that. You know, we're going to spend it on other things, such as, well, feel free to speculate on what they might be spending this other money on. So a bit of a rant, but I thought justified on the day, to be honest. Now, we're going to talk Hamilton. We're going to talk about a Red Bull as well. This is kind of remarkable. Hamilton parks him, of course, at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and on his steering wheel, you saw this graphic, which basically an Easter egg that was programmed into the steering wheel. what's incredible about this actually is how difficult it was to get there. Like, you can see how on the radio Bono told him like what to do to get to this thing, and look how many settings Hamilton has to go through. Like, he has to press all these buttons on the steering wheel, and eventually, having pressed about a million different things, he finally gets into the setting that they told him to get this nice little graphic. I think it was like setting 44, right, because of the driver number up on the screen, and this is what it looked like. Well, of course, you can't really see what it looked like or even what it said, so this is what it actually said. I believe this was the image in question, and I thought it was kind of nice because it had 2008 on as well. That was Mercedes powered, but of course not with Mercedes, McLaren at the time. Forever we rise. So this, I believe, was the image that came up on Lewis's dash at the end of the Grand Prix. And before we talk about his move to Ferrari, just quickly on Red Bull, because things seem to be improving there depending on your perspective. Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, though, are having disagreements on Yuki. The conclusion tends to be here, Marko quite likes Yuki, would probably put him in the car. Horner, the statements that he's made publicly imply that it's more about Lawson than about Yuki, and Horner believes that Yuki and Lawson are at pretty much the same type of pace, and therefore that makes Lawson more impressive, given his career so far has been shorter, which I do understand. Like, there are reasons you could put both in the car. To me, Yuki's earned the chance, but and I think that's how Marko sees it, but it doesn't seem like Horner sees it that way, and of course Marko doesn't maybe have the power that he used to in the team, and Horner probably is going to be the man to be making the final call at the end of the day. Tsunoda himself, of course, said if they chose Liam, it would be weird. So, Yuki's had enough at this point. Like, if he gets snubbed again, he's obviously going to make it quite clear that he's not happy about that situation, and I'm sure he's asking Honda to be on the phone and say, look, it's our final year with you guys, you got to put Yuki in the car. It's probably not going to be happening. However, could you believe it? We get this from Jos Verstappen today, saying that actually the team is on a bit of a turnaround. Now, a turnaround from a behind-the-scenes organisational getting along with each other perspective, which to be fair was inevitable because it couldn't stay as bad as it was at the start of the year, you would imagine. Whether they can build a quick car nowadays, especially with Newey gone and their simulation tools failing, as we talked about a couple of days ago, that is probably the big concern. But we know that Jos is very much in the Marko camp and is, well, he hates Horner. But it seems like Jos has recognised, all right, Horner's going to stay. I guess I can deal with it. And he says, yes, that is true. Something has changed within the team. Advisor Helmut Marko also seems to have more say now. And I think that's a good thing. The team is coming together a bit better now. But then he says, a lot has changed in the team. Some people now hold new positions, but I do have the idea the team has to prove itself again. They now have to show they're still fast because we attach a lot of value to that, obviously. Max sees it that way too. The pressure is on, as it should be. Now the team has to prove they have kept the right people with them and that they can build a fast car again. So, yeah, Jos is, he give and he takes, doesn't he, right? He says, oh yeah, you guys are doing well, but he's obviously not convinced by it. And also reading between the lines here, saying how they've got to prove it, says like, look, if they don't prove it, he's going to be taking Max to another team, which is, well, we'll see if that actually happens. I think it's plausible if Red Bull don't get their act together this upcoming season and Max doesn't win the championship. But as of this afternoon, the FIA have officially confirmed the F1 entry list for 2025, and this is what we find. So just before we discuss the drivers, quickly on the team names, just because I think there's been some changes here. So yeah, Visa, Cash App, Racing Bulls Formula 1 team stays, Aston Martin, Aramco Formula 1 team. I think Kick, Sauber, whatever the hell was happening there, they've changed that now. So it's Stake F1 team Kick Sauber, which I don't know if it was that before, maybe it was, I don't know. And this season it's also notable that everything is going to be called Racing Bulls with RB, so they're not messing around with RB anymore. Like, last season was crazy because everyone knew it meant Racing Bulls, and they had to come out and say, oh no, it doesn't mean Racing Bulls, it's just RB. And people were like, you're taking the piss. And obviously, even last year, I think the chassis was called, basically, I think the company name last year was the Racing Bulls, and they had to pretend that it wasn't the Racing Bulls, and now it is. So it's still atrocious, but they are at least admitting what it's going to be. But talking about the drivers, I mean, not everything's confirmed. We still don't have Tsunoda's teammate. And, of course, Perez is there, but is he really there? That's the question. Company name, team name, whatever, makers of the engine. But what about the drivers, as we go down the lift on the left-hand side, it definitely feels somewhat strange to see Lewis Hamilton officially pictured driver number 44 next to Scuderia Ferrari, HP, as they now unfortunately are with that sponsorship. But to be fair, they need that sponsorship to pay for Hamilton's salary. So this was officially confirmed as of today. I thought it was nice as well. Mercedes yesterday have effectively done their farewells to Hamilton. They held a bit of an event there at Brackley, it seems. They brought out all of Hamilton's championship-winning Mercedes outside. So I thought this was particularly spectacular, actually, as a nice little bit of a send-off. And there was also this moment as well that many people turned out for in Brackley, where Hamilton was driven along in the back of a Mercedes. And, of course, you know, the team and whoever could say their farewells, effectively. So it's understandable with this legendary relationship that Hamilton wasn't just going to leave in a heartbeat and go to Ferrari for the tyre test post Abu Dhabi. They've got things to do. They've got to close this relationship up with a full stop before then he can go to Ferrari and continue his career from there and try and achieve what he tried to achieve in 2021, of course, and didn't quite work out for a couple of reasons. Hamilton, therefore, reportedly learning Italian going into his Ferrari debut. At least he's going to try to some extent to learn a little bit of Italian, right? But there's obviously going to be extensive preparation here for Hamilton because we know that this season, as probably expected, wasn't the best. I mean, he was losing to Russell in qualifying, but to be fair, after what happened at the start of the season, knowing that you're going to break away from the team, it's always maybe difficult to make all that, motivation come through. And in the end, still a successful year. Won spectacularly in Silverstone, inherited the victory in Spa after the Russell disqualification, and Hamilton, back on the top step of the podium for the first time in a good couple of years. But I think if there's anything that's going to motivate Hamilton to get back to the form that we know that he can still show, but isn't always there nowadays, especially in qualifying, at least in last year's Mercedes, which didn't necessarily suit him, that will come from Ferrari. Like, there's no project that's going to get Hamilton motivated like joining the Scuderia, and that involves learning Italian and much other preparation as well, you would imagine. Of course, Hamilton also knows the likes of Loic Serra, the likes of Jerome D'Ambrosio, Fred Vasseur, of course, he has a good relationship with as well. So I'm sure he will be in conversation with these guys to say, okay, what's the best way to prepare for this new debut? Because we know when Hamilton joined Mercedes a decade and a little bit ago now, how successful that relationship became very quickly indeed. So I'm sure Hamilton will be trying to replicate a similar thing. Of course, not everyone is convinced this is going to work out very well, but look, I think the potential is there. Whether it's executed upon depends on Hamilton, but also depends on what Ferrari put together in terms of a car. At the start of 2025, the 2023 F1 cars will be available to be tested. That, of course, being the SF-23, which was a very interesting machine in the sense that it had good grip and its tyres would be switched on very quickly, and then it would murder the tyres in the Grand Prix. Leclerc had so many pole positions in 2023, but would lose all of the races, the poor guy, to pretty much Max Verstappen and the RB19. So Hamilton will be able to test that car very shortly. I think in the new year is the plan to get Hamilton in a 2023 Ferrari, maybe get Hamilton in a 2022 Ferrari, and, obviously the F175, which was particularly beautiful, ahead of his runs in the new car when that is fully unveiled in a couple of months' time. Just one final quick thing on Mercedes. Of course, Hamilton's not going to be there any longer, but Merc are apparently focusing on the rear axle. We saw similar limitations at times on the rear between Aston Martin and Mercedes, and it seems like, the rear tyres were struggling often, especially at high temperatures. As we full well know, they tended to prefer Mercedes, the lower temperature circuits. So that is what Mercedes are looking to resolve going into the new season. Whether that's going to work, whether it's going to help Russell and Antonelli, that is still a major question. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.